Another fellow and I collected the stamps, and we had our audio department put this presentation together, and we went around to Rotary clubs, retirement communities, Kiwanis clubs, and giving the presentation in celebration of the 200th anniversary. And so what I've done, I've dusted it off, and I mentioned the stamps. So what I'm going to do is take you through about 40 of there's about 100 stamps, about a little bit of verbiage for about 40 of the stamps, being mindful of the time. The thing that is so interesting is the antidotes that go with the stamps. There's a story almost behind every stamp, and not only the history of it, but something interesting about it. For example, this stamp is the first American stamp issued in 1847 with Ben Franklin on it. And you'll notice that it's 5 cents, 1847. We'll talk about a little bit more about that later on. But stamp collecting has served as a great thing for people to do for many, many years. And the post office in the early 1900s decided that we're going to support people that want to collect stamps, so that they tried to make stamps more interesting. In the 180-year history of the U.S. Post Office giving out stamps, there's been over 800 people featured on the stamps, and approximately 30 new stamps are issued every year. It's a little bit more now, but you think about 30 stamps a year, 180 years, that's all the stamps that we've really had. And what is so interesting that I want to prevail upon your thoughts today is that we are a Christian nation, Judeo-Christian nation that believes in God, and many of the stamps that we've had have reference to, in the beginning, God did what he did for us. And I'll try to show that in many of the stamps that you take a look at. And then I'm going to skip through some stamps here just to show you different types of things that, early on in life. This particular one is known as a Douglas fir, and it's a massive evergreen that is native to the northwestern U.S. Despite its common names, it's not a true fir, a pine, or a spruce, but rather belongs to the false hemlock family. So that, again, there's the story that I want to use as an example where people think, oh gee, this is this kind of fir. It is one of the tallest trees in the United States, and is the most important source of lumber for us. And then the next bunch of stamps just show the history of human beings or animal life, or animals and things like this. The American Eagle, issued to coincide with the 1968 presidential election year. The stamp was a patriotic campaign to encourage eligible Americans to register and vote. So this was issued in 1968, about the time we were getting ready for our 200th anniversary. And just this morning, I added a stamp. We think of the eagle as, American eagle, but the bison is also very, very American. And what's unique about this particular stamp is that it's one of the few times our government has put a stamp inside a stamp. So the stamp that they issued now is a forever stamp, but they went back and they issued it on top of another stamp. So these are the kind of things I'm going to show you through the presentation, where the government has done some interesting things. I'm sorry that the stamp is blurry. I added this one for the presentation, because this is the first U.S. postage stamp that celebrated Christmas. It's 1962. So not until 1962 did we have Christmas stamps. And this stamp was requested by people for years and years. The government wouldn't do anything about it. But they anticipated a huge number of people, so 500 million were printed, which was sold out immediately. They ended up producing 862 million of these stamps. Although this decision to print the Christmas stamp generated some controversy, especially from groups concerned about maintaining separation of church and state, the legal actions to bear the course were not successful. The United States went ahead, and then they followed that 4 years later by doing Christian stamps, or in this case, Jesus on a stamp. And you'll notice this stamp does not have any value on it. And the reason it doesn't have a postage amount on it was because the government didn't know at that time what the value of the stamp was going to be. But they wanted to get the stamp printed in advance of publication. In 1970, to appease those that, three groups actually, those that didn't want to have any reference to God or religion in stamps, those that wanted to have Christmas stamps, and those that wanted religious Christmas stamps. So the government decided they would do publication, at least one non-themed Christmas stamp and one religious one. So that started in 1970. And then, so there's been all different types of Christmas stamps. Most of them beautiful artworks. Switching to 1215 AD, the signing of the Magna Carta. Now, how does that have to do with American history? Well, the signing of the Magna Carta was the first time that the English king agreed with the English barons that he would rule jointly. So the signing of the Magna Carta was the beginning of representative government, and that's why it's important. And then this stamp issued 5 cents in 1915. And then in 1452, the printing of the first Bible with the Gutenberg printing press, which was the first product produced in 1452. So this stamp came out in 1952, and it was 3 cents. Again, the fact that, you know, the first product was the Bible. The Landing of Columbus stamp is a famous 2-cent red-brown violet stamp issued by the U.S. Post Office in 1892, 2 cents. America's first commemorative stamp. Until that time, the stamps didn't commemorate anything, you know, a picture of a president or a picture of an event. But now they're starting to look at something important that we're going to put on stamp, and this was the commemorative stamp of the Landing of Columbus in 1492. The Jamestown stamp, the Landing of the Pilgrims, the most notable releases were a 2-cent stamp in 1920 and a 6-cent stamp, same stamp, issued in 1970. Both honored the historic arrival in Plymouth Rock. So the post office has a tendency every once in a while to reissue a stamp using the same stamp that was issued years before, or they may change some of the background or things like that. Donna and Rosemary, here's Roger Williams. He founded Rhode Island. All right, this is the Liberty Bell stamp. It's a 13-cent airmail stamp issued on June 28, 1961 to meet international airmail rate adjustments. It features a famous bell against an olive background and Let Freedom Ring. Originally, the bell was made for the Pennsylvania State House in 1751. It didn't become popular until 1775, but they cracked it early on. They tried to repair it twice, couldn't repair it, and so it never rang, basically, after it was shortly minted. And of significance, the fact that when they made the bell, they spelled Pennsylvania wrong. one N. They couldn't fix that. So
Oh, wow.
it's a little bit of history. This stamp is Fort Duquesne, is a commemorative stamp issued in 1958 to mark the 200th anniversary of the fort's capture by the French from the English. Now, George Washington was a major, initially, attached as the American liaison to the British soldiers. Washington was the highest ranking American attached to the British Army, and there were American troops as well, or colonial troops in with the British troops. But the English tended to downplay the role of the Americans. But during this period, and you'll see Washington's picture is in the middle, Washington gained a lot of knowledge about warfare, and he eventually got promoted to colonel from the 7 years that he helped the British fight in the French Indian Wars. And on the third battle, they retook Fort Duquesne, and Washington was a primary soldier, officer that led all the British officers. Many of the British officers were killed, and Washington took basically command to help win the battle. This stamp, Boston Tea Party, you'll notice this stamp is 4 stamps, but each stamp is a separate stamp. So the post office does that every once in a while. We're trying to show a large scene. This stamp is a set of 4 8-cent stamps, July 4th, 1973. It commemorates the bicentennial of the Boston Tea Party. Many of the stamps show different scenes, and this stamp was our protest to the English taxing us for the costs of the French and Indian War. So at the time, the rebellion started out with over imposing taxes by Great Britain, and we got a little bit ticked off about it. So that's what started some of the rebellious things. This is interesting. The artwork depicts a man tacking a printed announcement known as a broadside. So these bulletins, we would call it a bulletin board today, they were called broadsides back in 1775 or thereabouts. In the era before mass digital media, public broadsides and community bulletin boards were the primary tools used by patriots to spread the news about the British actions. And it would announce the local militia meetings and circulate political ideas that fueled the American Revolution. And there's a series of these Rise of Independence stamps. This is a set of 4. And the Battle of Lexington Concord, the stamp aficionados, people that are real big stamp collectors and things like that. In the 1920s, they said this series of stamps was the most creative artwork ever issued by our government, and some beautiful, beautiful stamps that were made. Of course, the Battle of Lexington Concord as the shots heard around the world. This particular stamp, what's the next one? Is Salem Poor, who was a black freeman who bought his freedom several years before the Revolutionary War began. And he was a hero in that he killed some soldiers, British soldiers. And he was acclaimed in this stamp in 1975 on a 10-cent stamp. He died a pauper. The Betsy Ross grandson told the Philadelphia Historical Society an important story about his grandmother. On the news this morning, they were talking about Betsy. I don't know if you heard it. Remember we were driving. They were talking about the first flag, and there's some controversy as to how it came about. And the grandson of Betsy Ross said General Washington and two other representatives visited her in 1776. She was a seamstress from Philadelphia, and they designed a flag for her to do, except it had six-pointed stars on the flags that they designed, and she made it 5 stars. So there's no factual record of this, but the Betsy Ross flag continues to be the most beloved versions of our U.S. flag. And that's the Betsy Ross. Valley Forge, this carmine rose stamp depicts the famous legend of Washington kneeling in prayer in the snow at Valley Forge, which was the turning point of the Revolutionary War. And after this winter encampment, our soldiers were drilled to become more proficient soldiers than a ragtag bunch of guys just getting together for a fight. We couldn't have done it without the French, and that's 2 of the French heroes. This is the swearing in of President Washington. The stamp is 1939, 3 cents. And the president appears on the face of U.S. postage stamps of Washington more than any other president. The engraved images of Washington found on the early stamps set the precedent that other stamps would follow. And virtually every U.S. definitive stamp offered between 1851 and 1932, Washington appeared as the normal president in normal pictures. So many of the first stamps were just Washington and as president, and then Benjamin Franklin, who hadn't been president, but he was revered by the postage in making up stamps. Washington appears on more pictures than all the other president stamps combined. Little side on John Adams. John Adams, of course, was our second president, but he went 120 years after his death in 1826 before he appeared on postage stamps. All of the other presidents between Adams and Roosevelt were on stamps, except for Adams. And there was no plan at all to get Adams, say, on a stamp. But Roosevelt told the post office, you gotta set up a Prexes, Prexes series of stamps. So the postage department then issued a series of stamps every couple of years of all of the presidents that followed and used the same format. Louisiana purchased in 1803. Jefferson sent envoys to France to buy New Orleans from Napoleon, and he came back with 830,000 square mile, doubling the size of the United States. This stamp was issued in 1904 at the St. Louis World's Fair. This is the Fort McHenry flag and Francis Scott Key. A little bit about Francis Scott Key was that we sing the national anthem and we sing the first stanza basically, but it's the last stanza that is refers to God, and that stanza said, "And this be our motto, in God is our trust." So at the Battle of New Orleans, the Battle of Baltimore Harbor, again, we're bringing in God's and its importance of supporting the United States. Unfortunately, we don't sing that version as much as we should. Here's one, Jack, I thought you'd appreciate. We got a Missouri stamp, right? This is the Oregon Territory stamp, and we were showing this to our granddaughter, and she said, "Oh, you picked up Missoula, where her fiance is from." Okay, I showed you, the second stamp I showed you was Benjamin Franklin on a 5-cent stamp. This is Washington on a 10-cent stamp that was issued in 1847 at the same time that the Washington stamp. But what do you notice difference about this 10-cent stamp?
It's black and white.
Roman numerals. It's one of the few times they use Roman numerals on a stamp. It's been less than 10 times that they've used Roman numerals. Usually they're Arabic numerals that are in stamps. This is a early version 3-cent stamp that I just put into the presentation many years ago. I have this as an important stamp to look at because the painter, this Frederick Remington, painted several scenes of the Midwest in the mid-1800s, and it's American Indians, and being that I worked for a communications company, AT&T, or West Electric at the time, it was important for us to express communications, and smoke signals was the way that people communicated back in those times, or the Indians communicated at those times. Those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves. Under a just God cannot retain those who deny freedom to others deserve it not for themselves, and under a just God cannot long retain it. Lincoln again referencing God. Lincoln praised Jefferson as writing the Declaration of Independence, but went on, and this is in 1859, before he'd been elected president. Lincoln was going around talking about the need for freedom of the black people. Civil War. This 3-cent stamp, 1948. Oh, let's see. Okay, this one here. It was honoring the Gettysburg Address. It was released in November 1948. Marks the 85th anniversary of Lincoln's historic speech. There are 5 different plaques bearing this speech, and there are 3 different versions of Lincoln's presentation or speech. The one that is on his monument in Washington is the one that is quoted here. The speech is considered remarkable because of the content, the impact of its content, and it only had 272 words. People think, oh, it must have been a long speech, but actually it was a rather short speech. And that one nation, and this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom. Again, the reference by one of our great leaders that we live under a nation with God. I had to put one in for Alexander Graham Bell, of course. Okay, I'm going to spend a minute or so on this stamp, a Statue of Liberty stamp. In God we trust. France formally presented the Statue of Liberty to the United States in 1884 in a ceremony in Paris. The movement from that workshop in Paris to New York Harbor was completed in several years that followed. It was boxed up, many different pieces, and reassembled in the United States. And then the poem by Emil Lazarus' poem, The New Colossus, is that it transformed the Statue of Liberty from a symbol of American independence to universal beacon of immigration and human refuge. The Statue of Liberty stamp was originally issued in April of 1954 as part of the Liberty series. It was redrawn version following in 58. It is the first definitive stamp under $1 produced in 2 colors. Up until that time, stamps are always one color. Unfortunately, this stamp, the artist didn't use a picture of the Statue of Liberty. The artist mistakenly went to somewhere and got a picture of the Statue of Liberty in Las Vegas. If you've been to Las Vegas, there's a Statue of Liberty in front of one of the hotels. And they found out about it, and the guy who made up the statue then sued the U.S. postal system for $3.5 million, and he won the suit. This printing is 10.5 billion stamps made of this printing. This is another interesting one. Teddy Roosevelt, you think, 3-cent stamp. It was issued in October of 1948. It commemorates I can't speak anymore, the 50th anniversary of the U.S. Volunteer Cavalry. That's Teddy Roosevelt, right?
Yep.
No. That is really Bucky O'Neill from Prescott, Arizona, who's on the statue, not Teddy Roosevelt. George Washington Carver is the first black on a U.S. stamp, and he was honored in 1948. Although I showed you a picture of Salem Poor, that stamp came out after, although he lived in the 1700s, that stamp came out after the stamp had been issued. Now this is the Wright brothers, right? The plane looks like everything looks okay, right? And then Roosevelt, the Panama Canal, and veterans, World War II. Only 2 stamps had been made that commemorated World War I, rather, not I said 2. The 1919 Liberty Victorious issues and the 1961 John Pershing stamp. However, veterans started to complain, where are stamps that commemorate World War I? And finally, the post office came out with this one here, after the guy who wrote in, who had lost his leg and two brothers. And so the postage came out with this stamp. It pictures U.S. troops at the Second Battle of the Marne. Okay, can you see something wrong with this stamp? The plane is upside down. This is the Jenny inverted stamp, the most famous U.S. upside down stamp issued in error, 24 cents. It features a Curtiss plane upside down. With the errors are authentic, and of course then it drove the prices of the stamps up significantly. In 2013, the post office issued a new, purposely Jenny series with the flag with the plane upside down. But what they made 100 of the plane right side up, and they distributed them through so that the stamp collectors could go crazy trying to find the 100 stamps that were, the plane was right side up. So another little interesting thing about what the post office does is Lindbergh's plane. This is a commemorative stamp for the Great Depression, World War II. This is a D-Day stamp showing landing craft and the door down, allowing troops to make their way to shore. Behind them are smaller craft and half-submerged hedgehogs that the Germans had built to stop our soldiers from coming in. The Battle of Normandy, we lost approximately 29,000 killed on that entire battle, not just on D-Day, about much less on D-Day, but over 100,000 were wounded or missing. Iwo Jima. I want to stop on Eisenhower for a minute, because he was a military officer before he was president, and since 1956, the stamp I showed you with Liberty Series, "In God We Trust," has been the official motto of the United States. Its use on currency, well, preceded that, but on stamps, it was an important thing that Eisenhower had pushed for. And the argument at the time by Salmon Chase, who was the Secretary of the Treasury, and then eventually Chief Justice, that no nation can be strong except in the strength of God, or safe or expect a good defense. The trust of our people in God should be declared on all national coins and our postage. In 1954, the motto was added on the new Liberty stamp I showed you, and this stamp was primarily during the Eisenhower push for it. Eisenhower observed throughout its history, America's greatness has been based upon a spiritual quality, which seems to be, to me, is best symbolized by that stamp that we issued with "In God We Trust." Now, next, a bunch of stamps. This is a 48 star stamp flag, 49 flag, and 50 flag. Alaska was admitted first in 1959, earlier in the year, and then Hawaii was admitted later on in that year. Kennedy stamp. By the way, Jackie Kennedy designed that stamp. And we had to throw in a little bit of publicity for West Linter because we made Bell Labs was the inventor of the transistor. And the next couple of stamps are for our space program. And I concluded it with a copy of the 50 Star flag and the Betsy Ross flag. And then that's the flag that flew outside our factory. So, I thank everybody. Hope I didn't bore you too bad.
Take question.
Yes.
Which one's the most valuable that you showed? The inverted Jenny?
I didn't look that up. I'm sorry. I don't know.
So you don't have all these things?
No. No, all I have is the pictures. Yeah, I did, a funny thing, I did start at that time, Rosemary, I'll tell you, to collect stamps. I had them in a plastic envelope. And I went looking for them, I couldn't find them.
No.
So if I threw it away, but I had a nice collection of stamps, so.
Your Boston Tea Party stamp, it should be, you know, that was no representation, no taxation without representation. Now it should be, we should have a stamp, no representation without taxation. Wow.
What was the value of that upside down Jenny?
As much as $2 million.
$2 million?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they didn't all go for that, but yeah, especially if it wasn't stamped, you know, with a postmark.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Info. To answer your question,
Uh,
the most valuable U.S. stamp is the legendary 1868 1-cent Benjamin Franklin Z Grill, known as the Holy Grail of American stamps.
Benjamin Franklin.
It's sold at auction for $4.3 million.
Whoa.
Wow.
For a 1-cent stamp.
Wow.
I got 100 of those.
Wow.
Yeah, forever.
At least, yeah. Old dollars worth.
So, Barbie?
I've heard I know for a fact, there's a huge process that goes through to getting a stamp approved, because when Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix, those, you know, drugged out, you know, psychedelic people came out, I thought, well, Mary Kay Ash should be on a stamp, and she never has been, but it is such an amazing process to go through that, you know, I haven't pursued it.
Yeah. You know, it's a shame during the 60s and 70s and 80s that we became so non-religious in our feeling about how we could let the government issue things with God on it and stuff like that. In preparing for the presentation, I went back and I looked at some Supreme Court decisions. And I was reading to Rosemary that the present amount of judges that we have are much more interested in saying as to what was the original intent by our forefathers in God we trust and believing in God, and not the interpretations of somebody reading it. And today, that's what some of them are trying to say. So hopefully tomorrow when they issue, or this week, when we hear about the birthright thing, it'll be not what somebody's interpreting that we should mean, as far as people who are born in the United States because they're here on vacation, versus those that are truly part of our heritage. Okay.
Good
Thank
job,
you.
Emil. Appreciate it.
Wow. Wow.
That took a lot of effort. Thanks, Emil. And we also thank you for those delicious donuts. Well, we hope you have a good week. Good to see Debbie, our accountant, here.
Kid knows only one.
And let's close in prayer. as soon as Jack's not here. Father, we're grateful again for this time together, and we thank you for the history of how you have founded this country, how you have led it through many, many years of wars and depression and things that would derail a normal country. But here we are at 250 years old, and I pray, Father, that we'll be lifting our president up in prayer. I pray for our leaders, pray for wisdom, I pray for favor, and I also know that Israel is attached to us in a mighty way, and I pray that you'll bless them with peace in Jerusalem. Thank you for all your kindness and goodness. We love you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Well,
Good
next
job,
week we'll be
Emil.
back in Proverbs.
Wow, wow. When did you start becoming interested in?
I wasn't, I was just a member of the speaking bureau in Lee Summit. And this other guy, and I were talking today, and he said, "Can you do that topic?"
All right.
The speaking bureau is going to go out in the communities.
Thank you, Donna.